Ladies and gentlemen, we're back, and I'm super excited to be back. I really didn't expect this video, or at least the first one in the series, to do nearly as well as it did, but you guys completely crushed the light goal of 400 and instead got about over 1,000, so I can't thank you enough, and I also gained 700 subscribers from that last video, so thank you all so much for that, and the long-awaited part 2 is finally here. So at the end of the first video, I had just finished phase 1, and I decided that that factory was no longer good enough and we really needed to expand. So I shoved everything into storage containers and started expanding the factory aggressively. I'm sure Mother Nature really appreciated me installing 3 industrial miners straight into the earth and then sprawling a conveyor belt network all the way across the land. However, this is nothing compared to what we're going to be doing later in the video. Also, a couple people on the last video left comments and asked for me to give a better explanation for what a sushi belt actually is. So for the uninitiated, a sushi belt is just any conveyor belt that has more than one item on it. But in the context of this video, a sushi belt is just something that we're going to be cramming every single item that we make onto. And then the challenge in that is that it's going to severely limit our throughput and it's going to really slow down our factory, especially later in the game. But with that brief explanation out of the way, you can see that I just kind of took all these conveyor belts here, merged them together, and then I set up this little floating storage system up there. I figured I would just skip past this because it's pretty much what I had in the last video. But you can see the sushi belt runs all the way over these smelters, which is a little bit of an unorthodox design, but I like it personally. And then all I do is run it through some smart splitters after I figure out how they work. And that's my storage system for now. It still doesn't have an overflow, which I'll do later in the video, because at this point in the video I knew that this factory wasn't going to last very long and I really wouldn't need an overly complicated overflow system. The only reason I built this factory was to get us to coal power, and I quickly accomplished that too. Now, I did tell everybody in the comments last time that I would be sushiing all the fuel for my generators as well, and I do mean that, but that is unfortunately going to have to wait until the next video because all of this footage was already recorded before the first video even came out, so I didn't have time to do that yet. But with that, we can unlock basic steel production, and like I said, I will be sure to, especially once I have fluid packagers, sushi all of the packaged fuel in with all the other conveyor belts just to make it that much more messy. But now that we have coal unlocked, I just routed it all the way down the mountain into the sushi belt, of course, and started making steel. Once we had steel, I of course got Mark III logistics, which is really going to help our throughput since we won't have to use Mark II conveyor belts anymore. So I can go through the whole factory and upgrade all the important belts onto Mark III belts. It doesn't help that much until we get Mark IV and 5 belts, but 3 is good enough for now. I'm currently working on another series for Satisfactory where I'm beating the entire game, but the whole factory is vertical, like one single tower. And while I'm recording that, I didn't realize how bad the throughput issues were in the sushi factory because that's all I had been playing recently. But I'm excited for you guys to watch that video too because that has its own unique challenges, and I'm hoping to get that out soon after this one. You can see though, now that I upgraded all the belts to Mark III, they were moving a lot faster and we were getting items faster into the storage container. I also ground down all the living organisms near me into a nice little paste, and we were actually able to process this into what I believe is an exact replica of the Lunchables ham. Like if you guys ever had like the Lunchables ham and cheese, I'm pretty sure that's what they make this out of. But we could take all that and supply it to our masses, and that would provide us with enough tickets to get some really nice drip for the factory. I decided it would be worth it to take a page out of the CEO handbook and just cause a massive public health crisis in order to make a couple extra dollars, and that's exactly what we did. Thankfully though, it did pay off, and by feeding class 1 carcinogens directly to our population's children, we were able to afford some more drip for our factory. And later on, I also set up the line differently in order to assemble versatile frameworks in order to unlock some more of the space elevator parts. The last one that we would need is the automated wiring, which of course took advanced steel production, and I climbed up on the tower again just to get a little glance down on the factory, and I really thought that it was coming along nicely at this point. Not too much later, trying to speed through phase 2, I set up another little module in order to make the automated wiring that we would need, and that was the last part, of course, to complete phase 2 of the space elevator. So once we had all those automated and flowing directly into the space elevator, we were able to complete the phase and unlock all of the phase 3 parts. But while I'm shipping these up directly to the Amazon warehouse that is positioned directly above our heads, I wanted to point out the fact that I did upload this one day early, like I said, to my Patreon. So if you're one of the people watching that early, thank you so much. You are an absolute legend. And if my Patreon is something that you want to support, I'm going to have that linked in the description. Of course, that's never required, but I do appreciate it quite a bit, especially considering that, as I've mentioned before, I did recently quit my job in order to do this full time, so any support that you can give is incredible. But as always, just watching the video, liking, and subscribing will always be more than enough. I'm still absolutely amazed with how well the last video did. Like I said, it was kind of just a fun video that I recorded and never expected for it to blow up, and I'm so happy that I'm able to make part 2 of this series because it's a world that I really had fun working on, and I thought it was a fun video to record and edit. So I was really hoping for the video to do well enough to warrant a second one, but I never expected it to do nearly as well as it actually did. My current goal right now is to hit 1,000 subscribers by the end of next month, and considering how well the last video did, it actually looks like I'm on track to make that happen, and that would seriously mean the world to me. I'm already so incredibly happy with how quickly my channel has been growing recently, and I can't thank you guys enough. But with all that being said, we of course need more coal power. How else are we going to pump it directly into the atmosphere? So I set up another coal line, and then also had the spontaneous decision that I don't like the factory anymore, so I ripped, of course, everything down and completely restarted. I would definitely get used to this in my videos, really in any factory game that I make. A lot of times I'll build an entire factory, I'll let it run for like 10 minutes, and then decide that it's not good enough, and I'll rip it all down and rebuild it again. So this happens at least 3 or 4 more times throughout the video. But I think every time that I've done it, it has resulted in a better factory in the end, so it works out. One of the main reasons that I decided to tear down the entire factory is that I needed more raw resources being pumped into it, and that's hard to do when everything's already set up. So I set up another copper miner and attempted, and struggled clearly, to belt this down to the ground and connect it up with the rest of the sushi belts. And it was at this point that I was kind of thinking that it'd be fun to embrace kind of the energy that I had in the last video and make everything super hectic. So let me introduce to you the mighty mixing tower. This is a blueprint that I came up with. It's just 2 conveyor belts wrapped around each other over and over again, and then at the end they connect in a merger in order to merge all of the ore together. I ended up setting, I think, 6 or 7 of these up, and just placing down the blueprint and watching it slowly build was super satisfying. Also, for the keen-eyed, you'll notice that I actually built these backwards and had to tear them all down piece by piece and rotate them because I didn't realize that I had them facing the wrong way. But these mixing towers is actually one of the favorite things that I ended up building in this factory, and it's another reason that I just love the energy that I've been going with this factory so far. It's been really fun to play, and I also just like it when my factory is crazy to look at, and I feel like this accomplishes that pretty well. Another part of the new factory that I wanted to set up was an expanded power grid with, of course, the coal power plants that we've had. The last power grid was barely supplying enough energy for the factory, and with me expanding, of course, I'm going to need more, so I figured now was a good time to just pump even more coal into the atmosphere. At this point, I'm really just trying to speedrun global warming and get it here as quickly as possible. Also, yes, I am painting my pipes blue because they have water in them. If you don't color code your pipes, I immediately think less of you as a person, and I don't want to be associated with you. But with that being said, I got a nice glamour shot of all of the carbon being pumped straight into the stratosphere, and I figured just cementing this right into the local pond would help the population quite a bit. I also figured out how to use photo mode finally, which I did not know how to do in the first video, and so I can show off a lot of the factory a lot smoother than I was in the last video. Of course, I piped the sushi bolt straight through the hub again because you guys seem to love that so much in the first video, so that's going to be a reoccurring theme throughout this entire series. And I also built this kind of smart splitter tower. It was actually a horrible idea, and it made everything incredibly hard to find. This whole factory kind of devolved into like a schizophrenic mess of just spaghetti everywhere. I could never find any item that I ever needed, and there was some kind of beauty to that. This is almost like an art form, but I did finally manage to pump out motors from that absolute mess. The inspiration here was, if you've ever seen like a Warhammer 40k factory world, that's kind of what I was going for. I don't really want to be able to see the ground And I don't enjoy being able to find my items or knowing where they are. I also like it when it's completely impossible to ever expand on the factory, which leads me to tearing down the entire thing every 15 minutes. So this is really peak design if you think about it. But now that our industry had been spreading across the shoreline like some kind of disgusting virus, we did eventually get lucky enough to just find puddles of crude oil laying around, and what kind of man would I be if I didn't immediately harvest this and exploit the environment? So, of course, I set up the quickest transatlantic pipeline network that you've ever seen. And I know it doesn't look like I did it here, but I did actually paint all these black because, like I said, if you don't color code your pipes, you are in fact subhuman filth, and I won't be talking to you. But this pipeline was actually really quick to set up, and I'm realizing that the area that I started in is actually one of my favorites. There's so many good resources just kind of all around the area. Especially if you start in the grasslands, it's so hard to get some of the later game resources, whereas that doesn't seem to be as much of an issue in this area, so I think I picked a good spot. Also, while you're just watching me build this giant pipeline of oil, I figured now would be a good time to bring up the fact, I know I've mentioned it in a couple other videos, but if there's any game that you want to see me play, or if you even have some unique challenge ideas for Satisfactory or even other factory games that you would like to see me do, just leave that down in the comments. I know somebody in my last video recommended that I beat the entire game using only biofuel generators, and maybe it's insane, but that actually sounds like a lot of fun to me. Especially like maybe later in the game I could optimize it to use liquid biofuel. Also, I found this nice little rainbow and took a screenshot, so I thought you all would appreciate that. But anyways, I am always open to suggestions in the comments, and I do read and try to respond to every single comment that you guys leave. You can see here though, after tearing down the old factory and building this new one for phase 3, I got a pretty good start. I tried to implement some nice oil refineries for some fuel because I wanted to upgrade my fuel grid or my power grid again. I also put a nice little smelter stack in there, and you can see that it didn't take me long to get the petroleum generators going. These things are honestly some of my favorite sources of power in the entire game. I just think they're really fun to build. And I also set up a nice little highway for all the iron ingots and other metals to go down. I did honestly forget to route concrete into that at the very beginning, so I had to rebuild it and implement concrete. But with the bottom floor done, we can work on the top floor. And I also took a little bit of extra time to cut a hole. Ignore the playing for 8 hours, that's irrelevant. But I took a little bit of time to cut a hole in the top of the factory to let all these smoke fumes out. I mean, I don't really want to be breathing that stuff in, but if I just pump it out into nature, surely maybe they'll appreciate it. I mean, one man's carbon emissions are another man's terminal lung cancer, or however that saying goes. But you can see from kind of the aerial view, the second floor of the factory was messy, but not nearly as bad as the complete disaster that happened last time. So I'm trying to clean it up a little bit while still keeping like the messy spaghetti sushi aesthetic. And once it's all running and everything, I actually think it looks pretty nice. Like looking at this one, you can at least kind of tell what's going on, whereas the last one, it was an absolute nightmare to try to decipher where anything was. So this one's a little bit more practical. And I also like that you can look down and see the fuel generators from the top. I think one of my favorite parts about this factory actually is the little ore splitters that I had over here, which have proper overflows so that the coal doesn't back up and blow out the whole power grid, because that was a problem before. And if it isn't this, then definitely my favorite part of the factory is this massive ore like ingot wall that I have. I think it's really cool to look at, especially in the daytime. You can't see it that well here, but I really just like watching them all go up. But now that I had an improved setup, it didn't take too long for me to unlock Logistics Mark IV, which is of course important because, like I said earlier in the video, the higher belt speed that we have, the more efficient the entire factory is going to be. So as soon as I got Mark IV belts, I went through and upgraded at least the important conveyor belts so that the sushi would be moving a little bit quicker. And this is what the factory looked like after I added some walls, and I tried to add some beams to make it look a little bit prettier. That way it wasn't completely abhorrent to look at. Speaking of abhorrent, I took about like 30 minutes to make this completely impractical spiral that goes all the way from the second floor to the third floor. It's really cool if you watch it like wind up and watching all the items go through it. And looking back, I don't really know if it was worth all the time that went into it, but it exists and I'm not getting rid of it now. You can see that I actually set this up pretty clean, starting out on the third floor. But before we continue with that, I don't know how many of you guys know this, but I'm actually a huge fan of Elon Musk. I'm always impressed with just how awful his inventions are, and honestly, the Cybertruck just blew me away. So I decided to show Elon how much I really appreciate all of his disgraceful contributions to this planet and crash my Cybertruck directly into the local pond. I'm kind of hoping that the lithium battery just mixes with the water in there and does some magic. I read online somewhere that I think lithium batteries are actually really good for local fish populations, so hopefully that helps them out. I'm trying my best to make sure that the electric eels of the local area at least have somewhere to recharge when they run out of juice. I usually accomplish this by just ripping them straight out of the water and shooting them with a taser, but I figure maybe the Cybertruck is a more efficient way to get it done faster. On a real note though, I installed a personal elevator into my factory because it's probably single-handedly my favorite thing in the entire game, and I think it makes every single factory that they're in better. So if you don't have one, I would really work on that. It sounds like a personal issue. But after assisting the local eel population, I did actually finish this top floor, and you can see it's not nearly as organized as it was before, but it's also nowhere near as messy as my original design was. I mean, I got close to achieving that level of spaghetti over here, but really, if you're anyone but me, it makes absolutely no sense, and if you're me, it also makes no sense. But sometimes I would take a break from all the spaghetti and just launch myself into orbit. It helps me think a little bit more clearly, and I actually didn't intend to survive this, but it turns out that I do live right near a body of water, so sometimes if I got bored waiting on parts to assemble, I would just kind of launch myself into the stratosphere and pray that I landed somewhere near the lake. I never actually died doing that, so I'm just going to take that as a sign that I should continue doing what I'm doing. Plus, when you're about 150 hours into a sushi only challenge, your mind starts to wander, and I started to think it'd be really funny if you did hypothetically work at this factory, seeing the CEO absolutely hypertube himself into the orbit and watching him potentially splatter across the concrete would probably boost work morale. Anyways, the factory did eventually produce enough parts to unlock industrial manufacturing, which means that we can make the modular engine and also the adaptive control units, and those things will later in the video make me want to rip my hair out. But for now, I'm just going to smash a chisel into some SAM and hope that I don't get some kind of like super alien space cancer from it. But risking space cancer was totally worth this Bluetooth storage that I was able to assemble, and I mean, try not to be too amazed by my genius, but I did potentially set up the most inefficient dimensional depot setup that I've ever seen. It jams all the time, it hardly works, and it's possibly as slow as you could physically do it, so try not to goon too hard. I'm looking directly at you, Bradley Baker. If there's a Bradley Baker in the audience, I just want to apologize for potentially sending you into a schizophrenic episode. I am, in fact, in your walls, though. Watch out. Anyways, with Bradley taken care of, we started making modular engines. They were technically automated at this point, but once again, I think it's probably as slow and inefficient as you could possibly make it. So I decided to spend all that free time instead of improving it to just make the factory look really pretty for YouTube. That way, maybe you guys think I'm a lot smarter than I actually am. I mean, look, I even framed the windows, so don't flame me too hard for the absolute war crimes that are going on the roof, or really throughout the entire factory. I promise I'm good at factory games, and I'm also really super duper smart. You guys just wouldn't get it. On a real note though, this might be the slowest factory that I've ever made. I left my PC running for 3 days straight, and it still didn't finish all the modular engines or versatile framework. But like I said, instead of fixing that problem, I decided to just launch myself across the entire map, and like I said, maybe boost worker morale. I feel like if I was working somewhere under some pretty abhorrent conditions and I'd watch the CEO absolutely thunder cunt himself across the entire planet, that might make me a little bit happier, and I might postpone quitting my job or blowing my brains smooth off at least by a day. So really, that's all we can hope for. I was actually, on a real note, seriously impressed with how far that hyper cannon sent me. I didn't actually initially design it to fling me across the entire map, and I also didn't really know what to do once I was across the map, so I decided to just use the jetpack and see how far out we can get. And by doing so, I landed on this nice little island. Now, unfortunately, I did die, and honestly, that's probably the worst thing that has ever happened on any island. But anyways, immediately deleting that thought from my mind, I did set up the zipline network. I couldn't actually find your comment, but that one guy that asked for this to be in the video, you're welcome. It did make the cut. I hope you're stayed around long enough to watch it, because I'm not gonna lie, it actually didn't take that long to set up at all. And also, I tried to get a clip of me perfecting the whole thing and not screwing up and cheating and using the jetpack. But this video was honestly, at least for my standards, really late, and it really needed to come out. So you're gonna see me like kind of fumble through the zip line and sort of like, I don't know if you've ever seen a dyslexic kid try to read in front of the entire classroom. That's probably similar to what you're watching right now. It's like Spider-Man, but if he had severe Down syndrome. But anyways, I did eventually make it to the end, and therefore I did not lie, because I did promise that one guy that the zip line would make it into the video. And I'm actually really glad that it did, because like I said, it gave me something to do while I was sitting around doing nothing, waiting for my factory to magically improve, which, believe it or not, never happened. But once again, while I was sitting around and waiting for it to magically improve, I just kind of got some nice camera angles of the different spots. Here you can see the ingot wall during daytime, and it actually looks really nice. Really, this whole factory just makes me happy to look at, especially since I made it just a little bit prettier. Sometimes I'll just stand there and stare at the spiral. That may be undiagnosed autism, or it may be me just being really cool. Regardless of what it is, I did actually eventually get tired of leaving my poor PC running for like 83 hours straight, only to make minimal progress. So I did actually set up everything to make modular engines in a timely and at least slightly more efficient manner. Now, they didn't prevent me from attaching it to the wrong power line, like one that isn't even connected to the entire power grid, and then proceed to attach it to another power line while it's already got something attached to it. I never claimed to be like really good at these games, but now we're making modular engines at least an acceptable rate, so I don't have to leave my PC running all day. However, even with the improved setup, it still took quite a while, so I had a lot of free time, and I decided what better to do with said free time than just fill up the ocean with batteries. I figured the Cybertruck battery was probably low by now, so the eels would need something to snack on. And I think the thousands of copper coils that it took in order to make this little battery farm in the ocean should hold them off at least for another week. Now, the real reason that I did it is because I'm completely incapable of properly managing the power grid, and I always just end up randomly making stuff and blowing it up, so hopefully the batteries help with that a little bit. Regardless though, we finally made our first adaptive control unit. I finished all the modular frames off camera, and now that we had the control units automated, all I had to do is sit around until I got about 100 of them, and I could finally complete phase 3. This really was a long time coming. I know for you guys it didn't take that long. It only took like 20 minutes of your time. It took about 186 hours of my time though. So if you haven't yet, a like and a subscribe on the video. You can't really subscribe to a video. You guys know what I meant though. We're 20 minutes in. Anyways, liking and subscribing really would make my day, as it would make this whole video worth it. I had a lot of fun making it, but that doesn't mean that it didn't completely drain me, considering how long that it took. And screw it, if this video gets 1,000 likes again, what will I do? I will break the world record for the largest turbo fuel factory, like power setup. Surely I won't regret these words, but I do mean it. If you guys get this video to at least 1,000 views, that's what I'll be doing in part 3 of the series. And honestly, I'll probably post some updates on my Patreon about that giant project if the video does hit that much, just so that you guys know that I'm still alive and in fact did not get assassinated by the CIA. But I do mean it. I will actually break that world record. I don't know what the current record is, but I'll sift through the internet and find whoever made the biggest one, and I'll probably like at least match it, if not, well, obviously I'll have to improve it by a little bit, but I'm not promising to double it or anything, because I don't even know if that's possible, but I will make it at least considerably larger than whatever the current world record is. Also, I and also many other people consider Tier 4 of this game to be or Phase 4, I guess, to be the most difficult one, and I decided that I needed to move my base to a more advantageous position to complete Tier 4. But then I figured, why not just put it in a really cool spot as opposed to like a practical one. So I've decided to make a hypertube cannon to launch me all the way to the highest point in the game, and I want to make my next base up here. So in part 3 of the series, assuming that this one does well enough to warrant a part 3, I'm going to be building up here, and I'll probably route like a bunch of trains in order to like swirl all the way around the mountain, and then I'll just have some kind of like giant sushi base at the very top of the mountain. Preferably I'll have like nuclear power towards the bottom of it, since there's some water down there, so I think that would be a good spot to set that up. But regardless of if this video does hit 1,000 likes or not, I'm gonna be getting turbo fuel in the next video just because I really want it. Turbo fuel's great in this game. But that's about it. That's gonna be the end of the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate each and every one of you. I can't believe this last video that I posted did as good as it did. And you guys have really been blowing my channel up, and I just wanted to say that I really appreciate that. Thank you so much, and goodbye.